What to know? Installation of hardware components and other peripherals. One of the basic skills that you must acquire in computer hardware servicing is to independently assemble and disassemble the personal computer or simply setting up a PC. After familiarizing with all the tools, devices, peripherals, and safety precautions, I believe that you are now ready to gain another experience in CHS by going through this lesson. Personal computer disassembly. Before starting computer disassembly, make sure you have the tools you need and they're all close by and handy, and be sure to have a container to keep the screws in so you have them when you want to put things back together. Step 1. Unplugging. The first thing you do is to unplug every cable that is plugged into your computer. That includes the cables such as power, USB, mouse, keyboard, internet, Ethernet, modern, AM, FM, antenna, cable TV, etc. Just unplug all the cables for safety purposes. Now that your computer is fully unplugged, move your PC to a clean workspace. Step 2. Opening the outer shell case. First, unscrew the four screws at the back of the computer. On most computer cases, there will be large knobs that you can unscrew by hand or by screwdriver on the back right side of the computer. The left side has left The left side has small screws because on the side you can access much on the inside. Figure 32. Screw at the back of computer chase. Once the screws are removed, you can remove the side panels on most computers. They just slide off. Start with the left side panel, the side that once had the knobs. Slide it towards the back of the computer. Now you can remove the left panel just like the other side. Slide it towards the back of the computer. Figure 33. Removing the side panel. Notice, if you are working on a carpet, about every 5 minutes touch something that is grounded. Sink, faucet, pipe, wipe coming from the ground part of wall outlet. This is done so you do not shock your motherboard or other parts. Step 3. Removing the system fan. First, unplug the fan from the motherboard. You can find the plug by following the wire from the fan. It should be labeled SYS Fan 1. Next, you will have to unscrew the fan from the outside. You should now be able to lift the fan cut of the PC. Figure 34. Removing the system fan. Step 4. Removing the CPU fan. The CPU fan is located right on the top of the CPU heatsink, which is a large piece of metal with fins on the top. The CPU fan plugs into the motherboard in an awkward place that is hard to access, but just follow the wires and you should easily find it. It is labeled CPU Fan 1. To remove the fan from the heatsink, remove the four screws securing it in place. Figure 35. Removing the CPU fan. Step 5. Power supply. The first thing to do is unplug every wire coming from the power supply. You must disconnect the motherboard, very large connector plug. CD, DVD drive power, internal hard drive power, and portable hard drive slot power. Once everything is unplugged, unscrew the four screws holding the power supply in place on the back of the computer. Next, push the power supply from the outside and then lift it out. Figure 36. Unscrew the power supply. Step 6. CD-DVD drive. First, unplug the ribbon from the back of the drive. Once that is complete, pull on the top, securing the drive in place, then push it out from the inside. Figure 37. Location of CD-DVD drive. Step 7. Hard drive. First, unplug the connector at the back of the slot and unplug the other end from the motherboard. Also, unplug the SATA cable from the motherboard and the hard drive. The portable hard drive slot is secured the same way the CD/DVD drive is, with a tab. Pull on the tab, then slide the slot out. Figure 38. Unplugging the hard drive connector. To remove the hard drive from the side of the slot, unscrew the 4 screws securing it in place. You must be very careful not to drop the hard drive since it is very delicate. Figure 39. Removing the hard drive from the side of the slot. 8. Memory RAM. To remove the RAM, push down on both tabs holding the RAM in place, which are located at both ends of the RAM. Figure 48. Removing the memory.
Step 9. Motherboard. The motherboard has 7 screws holding it to the frame, which are indicated by large white circles around them. Remove them and then lift the motherboard out of the frame. Personal computer assembly. Now that you have the skills in disassembling a personal computer, I believe that you are ready to take another step of this module, which is assembling a personal computer. All you need to do is to follow the step-by-step procedures provided in this module. Step 1. Prepare your workplace. Take inventory. Before you start, take an inventory of your parts. Do not begin assembling your computer if you don't have everything you need. Begin the step-by-step process once you are ready with everything you need. Number 2. Make space. Make time. Building a PC takes up space, about a dining room table worth, so make sure you have plenty of working room and a few hours to proceed with minimal interruption. Work on a flat, stable tabletop surface or bare floor, where you have room to lay out all of the items. Number 3. Prepare grounding protection. Use an inexpensive anti-static wrist strap. Make sure you are wearing an anti-static wrist strap correctly. It does you no good at all if you do not wear it. And you are ready to proceed. Look at figure 43 for details. Have the drivers ready. Assuming you have another internet-connected PC, download the latest drivers from the vendor's websites for each component you will be installing. Sometimes drivers are updated between the time the component was manufactured and the time you are installing it. It is always best to have the latest. Copy them to a CD for easy access. Step 2. Prepare the motherboard. Number 1. Great care should be taken when installing the motherboard. First, take out the board out of its packaging and put it on top of the anti-static pack it came in. Remember, you always want to safeguard the components from potentially hazardous static electricity. Wear your strap. Number 2. Before you secure the motherboard into the PC case chassis, inspect it carefully for any visible defects. Number 3. Next, review the motherboard manual to make sure you are familiar with the motherboard layout and understand which socket is which. Manuals are extremely helpful, visually easy to read, and include illustrations. Below you can find the instructions on how to install the processor, the heatsink, and the memory modules on the motherboard. You should not place the motherboard in the computer case until you are told to do so. Step 3. Install the CPU. Use the unlocking mechanism to open the CPU socket, which is usually a lever. Carefully line up the pins and place the chip in its socket. It will fit only when oriented the proper way. An arrow or a missing pin on one corner of the chip will show you how to line things up. Align triangular CPU and socket key marks as shown in figure 46. Lower the lever to lock the CPU into place. Step 4. Install the CPU heatsink. Follow the manufacturer's direction to install the heatsink and then fan that will cool the processor. If you bought an OEM CPU and non-separates heatsink, you may need to spread a thin layer of the thermal grease that came with the heatsink over the chip to ensure proper transfer of heat. Some heatsinks come with this grease already applied. Attach the clip that holds the heatsink in place, keeping in mind that it may require a fair amount of force. Again, follow the instructions that came with the heatsink. They will show you how to fit it correctly. If you are in towns, you can visit the manufacturer's website for more information. Plug the CPU fans power connector to the proper connector on the motherboard. Step 5. Install memory RAM modules. In order to install the memory modules, insert them to the proper sockets and push them firmly but evenly until the clips on both sides of the socket pop into place. If your motherboard supports dual channel memory, consult the user manual to determine which pairs of RAM sockets you should use. The motherboard and the CPU are the brain and nerve center of your PC, so selecting these components is the most important decision you make. Step 6. Place the motherboard into the case. Some PC cases have a removable motherboard tray. If it does, remove the screws holding it in place and pull it out of the case. Note the pattern of the holes in your motherboard and screw brass standoffs into the motherboard tray or into the PC case in the correct locations. Always check the manual and follow their instructions to the letter. Check the layout of the sockets on the motherboard and confirm that the ports on your motherboard's back panel match the holes on the case's input or output shield that is installed in your case. If necessary, remove the old input or output shield by tapping it firmly a few times with the bottom of a screwdriver and then replace it with the shield that came with the new motherboard. Carefully position the motherboard on top of the brass standoffs. Line up all the holes and use the screws that accompany the case to fasten down the motherboard. If you are using a removable tray in your system, slide the tray and motherboard back into the case and then secure the tray. Step 7. Connect the power supply. Making the proper connections is crucial to successfully assembling your PC system. Fortunately, manufacturers provide color-coded power cables and unique connector shapes to make the job easy. First, plug the large ATX power connector from your power supply into the matching port on your motherboard. Look Figure X for details. Locate the smaller square processor power connector. You cannot miss it. It is the one spelled in the yellow and black wires, and attach it to the motherboard. Note, your connector is usually located in the processor. As always, refer to your motherboard's manual for the exact locations. Use your motherboard user manual and find the description about front panel connectors. Note, we are going to be doing work that requires attention to detail and can be quite frustrating if you do not go into it with the right attitude. Attach each of the tiny leads from the power and reset switches, the hard disk activity lights, the PC speaker, and any front panel USB and fiber ports to the corresponding pin on your motherboard. The needle nose pliers are useful for manipulating small pieces. Step 8. Install graphics or video cards. Begin by removing the backplate cover from the HP or PCI Express X16 slot. The metal piece where the monitor connector will emerge. Install the graphics board in the slot and then secure the card with a screw. Step 9. Install internal drives. Now it is time to install your drives. This is an easy process, but it requires attention to detail. Make any necessary changes to jumper drives before mounting them in the case. A 2-drive system, 1 or 2 SATA, serial 8TA is a standard hardware interface for connecting hard drives and CD or DVD drives to a computer. Hard drives plus 1 parallel ATA, advanced technology attachment, optical drive for example, is easy to set up. The SATA drives are jumperless, and the optical drive can be set as master on its own parallel. ATA channel in many cases have removable drive rails or cages to house drives. Use the included screws to attach your drives to the rails or cage and slide them into the case. For externally accessible drives such as DVD recorder, you can save time by installing one drive rail and sliding a drive in for a test fitting to make sure that its front is flush with the case. When the drives are installed, connect power and data cables to each one parallel. ATA drives use flat data cables that can be installed only in the correct way. Floppy drives use a similar but smaller cable. SATA drives use a thin, 1 cm wide data cable. SATA drives use a new type of power connector that many power supplies don't come with. Fortunately, modern motherboards ship with adapter for converting a standard 4-pin power connector to a SATA power connector. Step 10. Install the add-in cards. For each add-in card, you must choose a freebie PCI slot. Remove its backplane cover to allow access from the rear of the case. Carefully position the card above the slot and press down firmly to seat the card. Secure the card with a screw. Many motherboards have additional sound connectors or ports housed on small add-in ports. Some of these plug into slots on the motherboard, others screw into the back of the case in place of slot covers. Usually, the additional ports are not into the back of the case in place of slot covers. Usually, the additional ports are not essential to your PC's operation. For example, if you install a sound card, you do not need connectors to the motherboard's built-in sound chip. Check your motherboard manual to determine what each of these boards does. Connecting peripherals of a personal computer. When attaching hardware and peripherals of the computer, ensure that they are connected to the correct location of or ports. For example, some mouse and keyboard cables use the same type of PS/2 connector, so you must know first the different ports that can be found in the back panel of the computer. Keep in mind, when attaching cables, never force a connection. Plug in the power cable after have connected all other steps in connecting peripherals of PC. Attach the monitor cable to the video port. Secure the cable by tightening the screws on the connector. Plug the keyboard cable into the PS/2 keyboard port. Plug the mouse cable into the PS/2 mouse port. Plug the USB cable into a USB port. Plug the network cable into the network port. Plug the power cable into the power supply. After connecting all the cables into their proper places, the picture in the next page should be the appearance of the back panel of your PC.